You're listening to the Fandom Bricks podcast, sponsored by Lighttailing LED lighting kits for your Lego. Use the code FANDOM23 to get 10% off. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to yet another episode of the Fandom Bricks podcast. I am Josh, better known as the Galaxy of Bricks, and once again, I am joined by my amazing co-host, who needs no introduction, but is going to get one. So I'll take you over to him.
Hi guys, I'm Sam, better known as Bite Sized Bricks, and we are back 2 days in a row this week. We just thought there was so much stuff that we wanted to cover, and this episode, although we've kind of changed it up in the last few episodes, this episode is going to be completely different again. We are going to be talking about how everything links into Lego, but this is a very heavy Star Wars episode, isn't it, Josh?
Yes, hence why I am repping the Star Wars t-shirt. And again, you know me and Sam, we love Star Wars. So for those of you who don't really like Star Wars as much, stay with us because you might learn a thing or two. So yeah, there you go.
Possibly, or we might learn a thing or two.
Absolutely.
So this episode is going to, like we said, is going to be completely different. We are going to kind of be recapping Star Wars Celebration, or the main kind of takeaways from Star Wars Celebration. And then we are going to, because it aired this morning, we're going to be discussing The Mandalorian Chapter 23 and doing our set choices from there. That's going to be the meat of this episode. I think we're both quite excited to discuss that episode. So we'll get straight into it. And we're going to start off the top by talking about probably one of the biggest announcements or the biggest reveals from Star Wars Celebration. And that was the announcement or the putting out of the first Ahsoka trailer. So, Josh, first of all, what were your thoughts on the trailer itself?
Thrawn's back.
I mean, anyone who's listened to this podcast before has heard myself and Josh rave about Grand Admiral Thrawn. We've known that he's been on his way for a while, ever since Ahsoka mentioned it in The Mandalorian Season 2. But there is official confirmation now. We know who's going to be playing him. It's Lars Mikkelsen again, who did the voice of him in Rebels. So I love that.
Yeah.
So we got our first glimpse of Thrawn in this trailer. So that's obviously massive, massive news. What else did you take away from the trailer?
It looks, just the way it's set out and it's structured and things like that, it looks like it spans several different time periods. It's not just post Star Wars Rebels and the end of the Empire. It looks, based on some of the content of the trailer, that it's set during the Galactic Empire era, it's set post-Empire, and it's set in like sort of the Mandalorian era as well. So it's almost like we see the evolution of Ahsoka Tano in live-action form, which is quite exciting, really, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think there's definitely... Good. Ridiculous. I think you're absolutely right. I think they I'm gonna let them out.
Yeah, apologies for that one, everyone. The dogs are not wanting to contribute to this conversation, so I'm holding the fort briefly. But yeah, again, for those of you who are not familiar with the trailer for the upcoming Ahsoka TV series on Disney Plus, it is going to be streaming in August. It is available for you to watch now and see the trailer in advance, so you can get your own thoughts. But it's okay because Sam is now back. So my filler is over. I'll take you back to Sam.
Yeah, sorry about that. We've got 4 of them at the moment. We're looking after one as well, so it's a bit mad in here. No, I was just going to say that I do agree with you. I think there's going to be some time jumping going on. I think we're going to kind of see the immediate aftermath of Rebels, or where that finished off, obviously, with Ahsoka coming to greet Sabine at that point. I think we will see that point in time. And then, obviously, we're going to kind of get into the time period that we're kind of set in at the moment with The Mandalorian. I'd like to think that we're going to have a time jump all the way back. There have been rumors for a long time now that they have cast a younger Ahsoka as well as this Ahsoka we see at the moment. And so I'm praying for some flashbacks with Snips and Sky Guy.
Yeah, it's possible because if you sort of like break down the trailer, you'll notice that they've taken some of the Rebels scenes and put them in live action. So I think it's the scene from the first episode where they're going down the highway of Lothal, and we see Ezra Bridger meet the Ghost Crew for the first time. I'm pretty sure that has been done in live action, and then there's other things like that.
There's definitely a speeder bike chase. I think it's Sabine on there, so I don't know if it's the exact
but
recreation, but it's on the same stretch of roads and things. So
it's almost like the two have mirrored, because obviously by this time, obviously like post Rebels and things like that, Lothal is free from Imperial control. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like if they're going into like current day timeline Star Wars, which is about, I think it's like 9 ABY, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. It's really difficult to tell exactly where they are, because Jon Favreau has kind of come out in various interviews and said that Grogu was with Luke Skywalker for a couple of years, and then he tracked back and said he was with him for a year. So we don't really know the exact time period at the moment, but we know we're around about, like saying, 9 years after the destruction of the second Death Star, I think. So, I think it's, for me, the big takeaway is that it looks action-packed. It doesn't, I mean, there's so many fights going on. If you watch through the trailer, even within the trailer, you've got 7 or 8 different fights that look like they're going on. We've got lightsaber action, you've got space battles, you've got Sabine fighting what looks like a Sith or a dark side Force user. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this trailer.
Yeah, and I think the dark side Sith character, it could also be part of the Inquisition as well, which is what makes me think that it's earlier timeline, sort of Rebels era in live action. Because again, we know that some of the Inquisition were still around post the Battle of Yavin and the destruction of Endor. Some of them went on to become Imperial Remnant. Some of them went on to form their own bands and just go around just sort of hunting the galaxy. Because obviously, who knows, we could get a cameo from Reva from Kenobi, because she's around, because she survived Kenobi.
Yeah, it would be interesting to kind of see where all of these characters that we've met have ended up. We, at the panel, the Ahsoka panel, they sort of showed what looked like very similar, I think it was the second sister, some very similar artwork for the second sister. So I think you're right. I do think there's going to be sort of inquisitorious links in there. They've kind of come out and said it was intentional. I don't know if you saw the lightsabers. So the lightsabers don't really have like the white light in the middle, and they look more orangey than red, or like a very dark kind of shade of orange. The only other time we've kind of seen that is in some of the old, like, I think it's Dark Forces games, where they had dark Jedi rather than Sith.
Yeah.
And I kind of get the sense, knowing Dave Filoni, we know that he's bringing back Thrawn. We know that they love to bring legends into canon. I feel like that's sort of where they're leading. And I think if they go down that route, it does kind of open up, and we had it in our message group earlier, it does open up a kind of opportunity to potentially at some point bring in someone like Mara Jade and other characters like that. So I do think they're kind of opening it up a little bit more, expanding canon to kind of allow themselves the opportunity to bring in as much of the good stuff from Legends as they can.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I think Ahsoka itself is something that we could get nice links to previous aspects of Star Wars, but depending on how they go with it, they could easily go off to another part of the universe that we've never seen, go off and do their own adventures, and it's not going to intrinsically link with what is currently going on in sort of like the Mandalorian TV series or anything like that, because obviously we know that Ahsoka appeared in season 2 of The Mandalorian. She was in a couple of episodes of the Book of Boba Fett where she was with Luke Skywalker. So she has been around and she kind of does know what's going on, but she is not, at time of us doing this episode of the podcast, she's not a big intrinsic player to the fate of the sequel trilogy. So she could be off doing her own thing. We just don't know.
No, I've always hoped that is going to be the case, that this Rebels crew end up outside of the galaxy, so they're not linked to that sequel trilogy, because I think there's enough stories that you can tell. Again, going back to Thrawn, anyone that has read the book, if you haven't read the books, please go and read the new canon books, because they are amazing. If you're not into that, there's a comic book series that kind of dilutes it down into much more manageable chunks. But Thrawn's whole idea of being in the Empire, if you didn't know this before, because I don't really think they touched on this in Rebels, is that Thrawn has joined the Empire to see if they can be a good ally for the Chiss. He's only here. His only goal is to make sure that the Chiss ascendancy survives. He's not interested in the Empire. He might be a Grand Admiral in the Empire, but that's only in the hope that he can then go and help the Chiss. If it was a choice between the two, he'd be Chiss every single time. So I do think that using this Imperial Remnant, and we'll get to what happened today, which was amazing, but using this Imperial Remnant, I think Thrawn is kind of building himself a kind of fleet to take back and help out the Chiss, which is where I think ultimately this whole Mandoverse will end up evolving into, as stories about the unknown regions, or the chaos, as Thrawn calls it. So yeah, overall, I just thought that this was a great trailer. It kind of set it up really nicely. It reintroduced characters like Hera and Chopper and things which we knew were coming, but it was great to see them again. But one last question on this, Josh. If you were going to make a set from something in this trailer, what would you go for?
Tough on that, because there's so many great things. Maybe, I don't know. I'm pretty boring. I'm just like an updated Ghost, maybe. Like a newer version of the Ghost. Or maybe no, Ghost, or no, I'm just gonna stick with my answer of the Ghost. I think Ghost.
I think that's the one people want. We are rumored to have a Ghost coming out at the end of the year, so fingers crossed for that. Okay, so that's Ahsoka. We're going to move on to the next couple. I think this will be slightly quicker talking about these, because we didn't actually have a trailer officially released to the public for Skeleton Crew, which is what we'll move on to next. Did you hear anything about the Skeleton Crew trailer, Josh? Because I was lucky enough to see it myself, but have you seen it or heard about it?
I've heard about Skeleton Crew, and they've got Jude Law as one of the main characters, but I actually don't know much about it, to be honest with you. So I'm very much in the dark.
So the premise of the show is that there's these kids that are kind of off hunting a mystery, or kind of they're doing their kind of own research into something, and they get pulled off on this mystery and disappear, and then it's all about how their parents are trying to track them down, and I think Jude Law gets involved. The trailer for this was very much a kind of like scene setter. It didn't really give any storylines away. It was just like flashes of images that kind of gave you a feel for what it was. And Lucasfilm themselves have kind of said that this is kind of like the Amblin film. So it's kind of like E.T. or The Goonies. It's things like, they're kid-centered films. So the main characters are children, but it's not necessarily for kids. Which I thought was great to hear, because I was a little bit worried when they kind of pitched this as Stranger Things in space. I was worried about what that really meant for Star Wars. But they have spoken about this and how all these shows are going to link together. So it will be really interesting to kind of see how these kids go off on this mysterious quest, and how that's then going to link into everything that's going on in The Mandalorian and Ahsoka as well.
Yeah, and I like the idea of Stranger Things in space meets The Goonies, meets E.T., meets, those classic 80s adventure sort of style movies. And the fact that Stranger Things, at its peak, and to an extent still is now, is one of the biggest phenomena in modern television. If they can at least try and make that fit a Star Wars lens, it could really open up a lot of doors for merchandising. It could open up a lot of doors for future stories and things like that. So it's got potential if it's done right.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I get the sense that this is going to be. They haven't had a release date for this, so it's coming. Ahsoka's coming out in August. I get the sense that this would be a great one to kind of put out just before Christmas, almost like a family watch at Christmas. I've found, especially like having Jacob here, who's a Star Wars fan, he has been a lot less interested in the Star Wars shows that have been put out recently. Like, I know he's going to enjoy this episode of The Mandalorian, that again we'll get onto, but there's been a lot of character focused stuff. If you think Andor was the last series we had, this season of The Mandalorian, a lot of it has been about developing character and developing storylines and building them up to this kind of final event that we're working towards. So I think it would be good to kind of take it back and be like, this is like a fun family thing that everybody can enjoy, and have it without the kind of weight of recognizable characters.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it kind of, if anything, it's a case of, if it does well, great. It can launch careers. It can open up new adventures. If it doesn't do well, it was a good project, but they know that it's just not going to work based on the idea. So it's going to cost money to make, but in the long term, it's not going to be financially viable. Then they can just leave it and just move on to something else, which is one of the fun things about Star Wars as a whole. You can try different projects, see how you get on, and then stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's sort of been everyone's worry when you look at things like the Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, Solo to an extent, that haven't been widely received well, because you're always running the risk of kind of damaging the legacy of these characters. Whereas if you're creating something completely new, like you say, it's like a free hit, isn't it? If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. It's not really going to affect anything else. But if it goes right, that's great. That's something else. It's like The Mandalorian. If The Mandalorian had been rubbish, it wouldn't have been the end of the world for Star Wars, because they could have just gone back and focused on the main films. But it has been massive, a global phenomenon. So, yeah, I think it could be really good. Okay, on to the next one then, and we are going to talk The Acolyte. What do you know about this series, Josh?
The Acolyte, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's been rumored for a while, and it's been a project that a few people at Disney, Lucasfilm, Star Wars have talked about, and it's gone through a lot of different sort of chops and changes. Some of it has been well received, some of it hasn't been well received. And when you look at the name Acolyte, you know it's linked to the Sith, it's linked to the dark side of the Force, it's linked to not one specific Sith Lord, but it's linked to the ancient Sith Order, which I kind of like. If it goes back to a period we've not seen and talks about, and it's a Sith-focused series, I'm all for it. We get this whole thing about good and light, like good and dark side of the Force. Give me some dark side stuff for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that this is a show that is kind of based towards the end of the High Republic era. I think it's supposed to be around 200 years before Episode 1. So there's a lot of scope, a lot of wiggle room of places that we can go. But yeah, I love the kind of visuals of the High Republic, everything that they've kind of released in books and the concept art. It all looks amazing. Again, the trailer for this was just like snippets, shots of kind of getting a feel of it. But you're getting all of that High Republic imagery, all the Jedi in their like golden and white robes, which just looks amazing. And then starting to see some of these like dark side users in there as well, which was really cool. And actually the action in this trailer was very sort of martial arts based. It felt like almost watching a kung fu fight sort of thing, those sorts of films. And I thought that was really cool, like a different kind of addition into Star Wars there. But again, it was just kind of like a feel. But I've been pushing for ages. I want more High Republic content. I want to go further back into the past. So yeah, this looks really cool. It sounds cool. Like you say, getting a dark side centered story is something that a lot of people have been asking for a long time.
Yeah, And I think, again, the time period that it's set in, the High Republic era, this is very much when the Sith and the Jedi are both at their apex as well. This is very much when the Republic is a high and mighty power. The Sith are their equal, both from an economic standpoint, from a political standpoint. So it will be good to see the Sith when they're not just master apprentice. They're not just the remnants of an old legacy that has long been dead for thousands of years. It'll be good to see the Sith in a more modernized context where there are probably going to be numerous versions of them. There's going to be different Sith Lords with different apprentices, different Dark Jedi. And who knows? We could certainly get because to me, it sounds like it's going to be based on one acolyte's journey through either becoming a Sith Lord or the apprentice to a Sith Lord, and how that journey pans out. How are they going to effectively handle a galaxy like this as a dark side user? So I'm all for it.
Do you think there will be more than one? It's my only, because obviously it's supposed to be set 200 years before, and they say that the Sith have been, in like the prequel trilogy, that the Sith have been hiding in the shadows for thousands of years or however long. The one theory that myself and my brother were sort of toying with the idea is that eventually this may lead into having Plagueis in there somewhere, which I think would be really cool. Those that have read legend stories, Plagueis is a moon, M-U-U-N. I've never known how to pronounce that properly.
Yeah, because they're also called the Moon as well, like Moonarest. Yeah,
and they are like a banking clan, but they can live a lot longer than humans do. So there is a feasibility that he may already be alive at the start of this show, or that it may lead into something there. Anything that may potentially lead into learning more about Palpatine, I would love. Or learning about his master would be equally as good. So yeah, it will be really interesting to see what angle they take with it and whether they do add in more of them. But I think certainly we're going to get a lot of lightsaber action in this show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. On to the last kind of TV series, just very quickly touching on this because we don't really know much about this yet. We had sort of flashes of images. But Andor season 2 obviously is filming. They've obviously filmed quite a lot of it already to put out a very sort of short teaser trailer. Where do you see this going? Oh my word! Where do you see this going? And what were your thoughts about Andor season 1? Are you looking forward to the second season?
Andor, at first, I wasn't as invested in it. I thought it was very slow. It was very drawn out because effectively Andor is one of those TV series where it's cool. We get a bit of context and a bit of background into Cassian Andor before he was a rebel spy, but we knew the outcome of what was going to happen to him anyway. Anytime he was in danger in the series, you were like, well, he survives to Rogue One, so it's a little bit redundant. But it was nice because we got to sort of see the Empire in a different way when it was kind of before it was this big apex bad guy. They kind of showed us that blurry sort of fine line between them being a post-Republic power that are trying to bring stability to the galaxy, but then also a massive force that people are fearful of and they're afraid to combat against. Whereas obviously the last episode of Andor I thought was fantastic. The rioting and how it ended, and that was just a phenomenal episode. So I'm hoping we get a little bit more of that and we see him on his way to joining the rebellion. We get some more stuff about Luthen Rael as well, because there's something about the guy that is definitely not adding up. And I just hope it ties into Rogue One really nicely.
Yeah, I think it will tie in really well. I think I was sort of the same as you when it was coming out. It's like, we know the fate of this person. I'm always skeptical about stories like that when you already know that they're going to make it through the series. I actually think in the few episodes where he was in danger, they did it so well that you did genuinely you forgot that he survived and you did actually think he was in danger. But I think, like you said, the big takeaway from season 1 was actually seeing how the Empire works, seeing what you have to do in the rebellion, and that actually being a part of the rebellion isn't just this like, we're going to take down the bad guys. Like, sometimes you have to do bad things to get stuff done. And like you say, with Luthen Rail, he was, I mean, Stellan Skarsgård is an unbelievable actor. That speech that he does where it's like, I'm doing all of this so that you can see a sunrise that I'll never see. Like, that whole speech is just mind-blowingly good. And so I think he's going to play a large part in it. And obviously you get the sense that at some point he's going to get taken out. I think what I'm most looking forward to is seeing, like you say, how it's going to link into Rogue One, how it's going to kind of flow into that story, and what sort of pieces we're going to pick up. I'd like to see. I feel like it's a bit of a redundant, but I'd like to see him meeting K2SO. I would like that story. I don't know how interesting that story is going to be to actually put it in the show or not, but I would like to see it.
Yeah, and I think again with the whole Luthen Rail thing, you've got a lot of loose threads from season 1 of Andor that they're going to have to tie up, because obviously you've got the whole fallout from Ferrix and Cyril Khan and what happened with him. You've got the fact that the ISB are now being shown live action as being this dominant power within the Empire. You got Colonel Yularen, and he is definitely a character that I would like to see more of. But also, you're getting the sense that what the actions of Andor and Luthen Rail, Mon Mothma, whilst to them they felt small, the reality is what they're doing has actually set wider implications for the rest of the galaxy. Like, they could be responsible for some of the stuff that happens in the movies, and that's kind of like a really nice sort of hook, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was the one thing that I loved about Rogue One, is that actually this seemingly independent story had massive implications on things that we thought we already knew about, but actually it kind of broadened your knowledge of all of those events that went on, and that's what I'm hoping for from this second season, that it will just continue to build on this bank of knowledge that we think we already know about all of these things, but it's just going to kind of improve on all of that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope it brings back Mads Mikkelsen and Ben Mendelsohn as well. That would be really nice to see, to get Krennic again in live action as opposed to animated, and to get Mads Mikkelsen as well, and we learn about Project Stardust and the creation of the Death Star a little bit more. That would be really cool as well.
I mean, with that post-credit scene last time, I can't see any way that we get through the second season. And obviously, Galen Erso is the scientist behind it, so I think he is less likely, although I still think he's likely, but I don't see any way we get through the second season and don't see Krennic at some point.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's an absolute cert at some point. Yeah, great. Okay, now we're going to move on to the kind of next round of stories that came out, and this is the exciting bit. We have had announced three different stories. And I think we'll start right at the start. And there is a Dawn of the Jedi era, and we're going to have a movie directed by James Mangold, set 25,000 years before the events of the Skywalker saga, about the beginnings of the Jedi. I mean, this just sounds amazing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's just going to be really exciting because, again, it's almost going back to the old expanded universe, which is now called Legends, because you had the Jedi, which was like JED apostrophe HIII or whatever it was, and you learn about the difference between Force sensitives and the good side, the dark side of the Force. They had lightsabers that were powered by utility belts, so they were on a wire, which was pretty cool. So I'm hoping for stuff like that, because they have got the scope of learning and teaching and showing us how the Jedi were formed and what why it is. But it'd be interesting to see how it comes about. Are they going to play the Jedi as exactly good? Are they going to be a little bit ambiguous at first that become good? Are we going to see some Jedi become evil and that leads to the Sith and things like that? So it'll be nice to sort of get that. And I think, again, it leaves up the potential for a lot of different stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're 25,000 years in the past, you can build up almost like a Skywalker saga-esque thing. You can create new characters and build up their own long journeys that don't have to finish in one film. Although I would like to see the first film be a kind of standalone story that has a finish and an end. But obviously with the idea that you could then expand on that. This is pure sensible speculation.
Yeah.
But we had 2.5, 3 hour journey back from Celebration the other day after hearing all the announcements about this. And we got very deep into like, what could it be about? And if you look down the kind of themes that Star Wars always bring out, I think the idea, is probably going to be a light side, dark side thing, isn't it? If it's about the discovery of the Force, the likelihood is it's going to be all about those choices. You can choose the easy path, the dark side, or you can choose the light path. And we were sort of toying with the idea. We like the idea of it being almost like twins. And they've used these stories in the Old Republic and things like that, where you have twins and you have one that chooses the easy path and one that chooses the light path. I think that would be a really, really interesting story if they're discovering how to start to manipulate the Force, because obviously the Force is everywhere. It surrounds us and binds us. But yeah, I think if the Force is there and people are starting to use it, it's how do you use that power? And I think it would be really interesting if you have, like, I mean, Luke and Leia are twins, aren't they? If you've got twins and one kind of bouncing off the other, I think that would be a nice route to kind of tell that story. Purely speculation, but certainly something that I'd like to see.
Yeah, very deep conversation there you must have had on the way back from Celebration. And
hours.
Again, another option as well is if you don't want to go for the twins route, you can make it a little bit like Romeo and Juliet. You could have them to, a couple who fall in love. One is evil, one is good, but they're linked through love, and it's how their ideas and their ideals contrast with each other. And the likelihood is if they went that route, one of them will die, and it could lead to one of them, the one who dies being redeemed, and then the good one being evil. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of scope.
Yeah, definitely. I think just to get an understanding of the Force, I don't think people are that interested in. I think what people are more interested in is the idea that we can tell completely new stories with new characters that can lead somewhere, that because it's so far in the past, it doesn't have to have any impact at all on what has happened before in the Skywalker films. So I'm less excited about the prospect of learning about the Jedi. I'm more excited about the idea of just new stories within Star Wars. So that could be cool. And then we go to the complete other end of the spectrum, and we have got announced a new Jedi Order led by Master Rey Skywalker over here. What were your initial reactions? Because a lot of people had an initial reaction to this. What was yours?
It's impartial, really, because I get that the sequel trilogy is Disney's impact for Star Wars now. They introduced it to they introduced Star Wars to a fresh new fandom, a new set of movies. They've had marketing, they've had money, things like that. We've learned all about obviously what happened to Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order. We've learned about how Palpatine somehow survived and things like that, and it's all linked in. If we do a new Jedi movie, who are they going? Is it going to be a case of it's the Jedi against politics? Or is there going to be a threat we don't know about? I just want to know the basic plot details before I get really invested in it, because it could either be really interesting or it could be a dud, and I just don't want to bring myself up for disappointment.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction actually was good, because I think that they were always going to tell stories beyond the Rise of Skywalker, and I think it just would have been so weird had they gone on and maybe jumped 100 years into the future and completely ignored Rey Skywalker and everything else. I think this is the right. It's saying it's 15 years on, which I think is a good enough time jump where she could have established some sort of Jedi Order. Like you say, we still need to know the details and what the kind of plot of the story will be. But my initial reaction was actually quite excited. I was part of the generation where Clone Wars came out when I was maybe 17, 18 years old. And I was like, that doesn't count. It's cartoons. It's not canon, blah, blah, blah. And it took me until like season 5 when I got told that Maul was joining the Clone Wars, where I was like, okay, I'm finally going to give this a go. And then you watch it and you're like, this is incredible. But what Clone Wars does is it expands, like Andor is doing, it expands those prequel trilogy films. And a lot of people that didn't like the prequel trilogies now have a better understanding and a more appreciation for them because they know the stories that go on around them. And what I'm hoping is that this film, or films if it is going to be multiple, will give us a better understanding of the sequel trilogy and who Rey is as a character, and actually give us more of an appreciation for those films. I think if you can build other stories around it to kind of lift those films up, I think that can only be a good thing.
Yeah. And you just hope as well that they have fresh ideas and it's not all linked back to the Skywalker saga and Palpatine and things like that, because no disrespect to that, it has been a big part of the franchise and that is the key element of Star Wars. It's based on the Skywalker family, the journey of father and son, the good, the bad, the redemption, but it's been done. You know,
Yeah.
It's time for fresh ideas. 15, 20, 30 years in the future, we don't know what the galaxy is going to be like. It could be Rey as the head of a Jedi Council, where maybe the Chiss are a big time player in the galaxy. There could be an existential threat that has emerged. We could get something completely different. It could all be basically Force users versus non-Force users, and how Force users are effectively kind of like the mutants of the X-Men universe. There's options, but I want to hear more of the plot before I really make a solid statement of yes or no.
Yeah, I think what might be interesting if they develop a new threat, if they kind of go down the original idea of the Mandalorians, that they designed themselves to be able to combat Jedi. So it'd be really interesting if the foe or the bad guys, whatever they are, they weren't Force users, but they had found a way to combat the Jedi and found a different way to look at it. So that would be interesting. I think, like you say, don't tread over old ground. I think if they did this, I think I might stop being a Star Wars fan. If they decided to clone Rey to create Emperor Palpatine again, she's a Palpatine, isn't she?
Yeah.
So, like, if they went down the route of Palpatine, I know they wouldn't do that, but if they went down the route of Palpatine again, I think I may have to just stop Star Wars for a while.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? We're kind of leaving ourselves open to these ideas, but we're also leaving ourselves open to effectively a rehash of episode 9 and how that turned out. So let's be very optimistic with that one.
We'll be optimistic. Okay, so the final thing we're going to talk about before we talk about chapter 23 is the kind of culmination of the Mandoverse and having a Mandoverse movie. One of the things I'm most excited about this is that it's being produced by Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, but it's also being directed by Dave Filoni. So it's his first ever live action movie, which is exciting. I would say that actually some of his Mandalorian episodes that he's directed have been some of the weaker ones, but then that may have been out of choice where they've kind of given him, because he's learning the ropes a little bit. They might have chosen some of the weaker stories to give him, rather than giving him some of the bigger, more important episodes, I guess. But I'm really excited for this. I like the idea of all these stories kind of culminating in one film. Where do you kind of see these stories heading, and what could be the movie at the end?
It's nice to see that Disney can bring the Infinity Saga into Star Wars, though, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it is. But what I'm hoping is that this is the Avengers and not Endgame. I'm hoping this is like the start of it before it kind of expands even more. What I don't want this is to be Endgame and it all just cut off here. I think to kind of end the Mandalorian story, the Ahsoka story, Skeleton Crew, anything else that they're doing, if it all cuts off at the end of this film, I think that would be a little bit blunt. So I'm hoping for Avengers rather than Avengers Infinity War or Endgame.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it was inevitable that they were going to go down this route with the Mandalorian, and now that the Mandoverse is its own thing, it's an established part of Star Wars lore. The Mandalorians, their culture, their heritage, their history, and the very nature of what Mandalorians are gives us the opportunity to found and create and design new stories. So I think the idea of a Mandalorian movie is a good idea because, like you say, we've got this big, wide galaxy out there, and you could easily see them using this current iteration of the Mandoverse with the Mandalorian. They've done things in Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew, whatever and whatever. They could use that for a movie that then breeds off and creates other stories and things like that. And it gives Disney and Star Wars the option to create more stories around newer characters, fresh ideas. And who knows, we could see the culmination of Grogu becoming the new Mandalore. He could be Mandalore, the savior of Mandalore. Grogu could be the next true Mandalorian. You never know.
Yeah, you don't know. I would be surprised if they went down that route. But one thing that we did discuss, because this is going to kind of sew up the Ahsoka and Mandalorian storylines, if Bet365 had an option to do this, I would be placing all the money that I own that Ahsoka dies in this film.
Oh, okay.
That's my big kind of prediction. And I don't actually think, when you think about it logically, I don't think it is a big prediction. She's getting towards later life at this point. She started off on the small screen, a hated character. She's come back through. She did Rebels and everybody loves her. And now she's got her own show finally. I think Dave Filoni has always had her life kind of mapped out in his head of where she's going. And I think the only way that Ahsoka can die is by doing an Obi-Wan and self-sacrificing to save someone else, doing what Kanan did. I think that's the only way. And I think that is such a Mandalorian thing, such a Jedi thing, is to actually sacrifice yourself to save others, is like the honorable thing to do, isn't it? As a Jedi, as a Mandalorian. So I think on the big screen, I just think that could be such an epic Star Wars moment. Can you imagine seeing that Kanan scene on the big screen in live action? Like, how good would that have been? I just think if they give Ahsoka the kind of end that she deserves on the big screen, I just think that's the route that they're going to go down.
Yeah, Thrawn and Ahsoka have a final confrontation. They both die together in a ball of flame. And...
Oh God, you can't kill off my two. Maul is already dead. Ahsoka and Thrawn can't both die. I can handle one of them going.
Hey, but then again, I would be more inclined to think Ahsoka than Thrawn, because Disney have stated that they have big plans for the future of the Mandalorian universe around Thrawn and the Chiss. So, yeah, I'd say Ahsoka dying in a movie is very much a very safe bet.
Yeah, I would like to see Luke Skywalker in there. I think if there's some sort of big showdown going on that Ahsoka is involved in, I find it really I think I would find it difficult to believe that she doesn't contact Luke, or Luke doesn't find out about it some way, because we know that he's around the galaxy at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, how good would it be if there was a big showdown and all of a sudden the Millennium Falcon swoops in and Han and Chewie are that, like, there's all of these things are possibilities because all these characters are just sort of traveling around the galaxy at this point.
And then you see like the Millennium Falcon appear, and then Rogue Squadron just appears as like its escort, and then you get like Wedge Antilles and things like that, just shooting down and just destroying whatever is attacking them. And it's just like, yeah, the options are there. And I think as Star Wars fans, we create stories in our heads, and we kind of have our own stories and our own vision of what we would like to see. So it's nice to see that Filoni and Jon Favreau, as Star Wars fans, not as, you know, producers, directors, writers, they are genuine Star Wars fans, and the love that they have for Star Wars as a whole is nice. Because if you were to look at it, if you were somebody who had no interest in Star Wars whatsoever, and you were asked to write a movie or write a series, and you had to then go off and design an entire 10-episode miniseries sort of style thing on something that you weren't genuinely interested in, people aren't going to be invested in it because it's not going to be done with the same love and detail that Filoni and Favreau have done. But you see how much time and effort they've put into Star Wars, and it's nice because it's written by fans effectively.
Yeah, and we'll get into the episode very soon now, but we're seeing the rewards of that now. And I think, like you say, I think the reason why it works so well is because Favreau kind of looks at it from a fan's point of view and sort of says, well, I think fans would want to see this. As a fan, I would want to see this on the screen. And then Filoni says, oh, well, that doesn't quite work due to this in canon or these, because he's got all of that knowledge. But actually, we could tweak it a bit and we could turn it into this, which would work, and that could lead into this storyline. And I just think that's why they work so well together. You've got on the one hand, the guy that was kind of mentored by George Lucas himself, that has this unbelievable knowledge of Star Wars and what Star Wars should represent. And then you've got the fan on the other side that's like, well, I want to see this because this is going to be cool. How do we kind of merge those two together? And I think that's why The Mandalorian has been so popular up until this point. So we're not going to get into too much more speculation on that, because we obviously want to talk about the episode, because I think this episode has hinted a lot towards what that movie ultimately could be. And so let's do it. Let's get into chapter 23 talk. We've got the man himself here. Just in case anybody is watching this now and has not seen The Mandalorian, we are going to be heavily spoiler talking here. We've already given away something, that Gideon's back. But that's not a big giveaway. But we are going to be talking heavily in detail about this episode. So first of all, Josh, what were your initial reactions from the episode?
Oh, I mean, when Darth Maul and Jar Jar Binks flew in on Minox, you know what I mean? Oh God, I didn't expect that one. It was like something from Bad Boys 2. No, I'm kidding. There's no Darth Maul and Jar Jar Binks yet.
Sadly.
No, honest to God, I watched it, and I think what got me was the fact that as a fan of the old expanded universe and Legends, there was so much Legends-based lore within the first half of the episode. And my brain nearly blew up with some of the stuff that happened, because it was the longest episode we've seen of this series. It was 53 minutes, but not a single part of that 53 minutes was wasted. Everything in this episode made up for the dud that was the previous week's episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
We've just had a comment in from Dr. Mad Studio. He says, "Hello, folks. Greetings from Merseyside. Not often I come across a live stream hosted by fellow Brits." No, I think that's true. Actually, I think most of these discussions are American based. We're flying the flag for the Brits at the moment. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that cold open, the first sort of 6 minutes of the episode, it was a long cold open before the actual title screen came up. Was just like, remember the last episode? Forget about it. This is where we're at now. And it's like, this is what this show is going to be for the next 2 hours or however long the last episode is going to be. And they set the scene perfectly. I love the fact that they are linking. Obviously, they got Commandant Hux in there. And I think I'm right in saying, I haven't fact checked this yet, but I'm sure someone told me after we saw it that it's played by Donald Gleason's brother. So General Hux in the sequel trilogy is his brother playing his in-universe dad. So I think that worked really well. And it very much came across that he was a Hux. I think they've definitely got a certain way about them. I thought that was brilliant. Obviously, we had Pelion in there as well, which obviously huge links to Thrawn.
Blew up when I saw Pelion.
Yeah. And then obviously the big mention of Thrawn, where has he been? I loved this, like, Gideon trying to be cool and saying, oh, well, maybe we need new leadership. And I'm just there, like, giggling away to myself, as if you could usurp Thrawn to lead this empire. You've got absolutely no chance. I get the feeling that this is all going to end badly for Moff Gideon, and Thrawn's just going to turn around at the end and be like, he's an idiot. I told him not to do that. He should have followed my orders.
Yeah, exactly. And the nice little detail as well for that cold opening was the fact that we had the Shadow Council in hiding, because obviously, for those of you who are familiar with the Aftermath trilogy of books, the Shadow Council were effectively led by Sidious's protege, Gallius Rex, who was a fleet admiral. He was the figurehead behind Ray Sloane. So while she was the figurehead and the puppet for the Empire, Gallius Rex was the actual true power of the Empire all the way up to Jakku. And it was nice that they brought the Shadow Council back in live action, and you've got all these different warlords who are effectively saying, yeah, we need to pretend that we're beaten by the Empire, but the reality is we are very much still in a prominent position. We just don't want the Republic to know that. If we combined all our forces, we could take them on and do quite well. That was a nice little touch.
Yeah, I really liked that, actually, because in the past we have had, it's almost come across as like the Empire are making stupid decisions. Like, come on, you're smarter than this. If you're ruling the galaxy, you should be making. But this is and it screams Thrawn all over, like a genuine strategy. Like, we're going to build up our fleets, our individual fleets, and we're going to keep separate. Go lay low under the grid so the New Republic don't see us, and then when we've got enough and we've built up all of these things, we can rise again. And it's a great, I think it's a great plan, and it definitely seems like a Thrawn kind of plan, because Moff Gideon is all about going in and just destroying things as quickly as possible. So I thought that was really cool. We just had another comment from Dr. Mad Studio here. I'll just bring it up. Did you guys attend Star Wars Celebration? I wasn't able to go, sadly. Too big for my wallet, and London is too far. It's a long way from Merseyside, but I did go. Josh unfortunately didn't get the chance this time to go. The one thing I would say, and I don't think enough people kind of mention this, Star Wars Celebration is like herding cattle for a lot of it. It is it's highly attended, and there's a lot of desperate people trying to go and see things and pick things up, and so I'm lucky enough that I've been to previous ones as well, so that this time I didn't feel stressed by the situation. I could kind of take it at my own pace, and luckily we got into some panels to see different things, so I was very lucky this weekend. So yeah, just going back to that. So that cold open, we've only got that far. The cold open, I think, was amazing. And I was texting my brother, like, we did a 3-2-1 if you're like me, I wake up at 8 o'clock on Mando days, and it's like I'm playing it, and I was refreshing it. And this, for the first time ever, normally it's like 8 o'clock on the dot, it's on. At like 10:02, it was up. And I was like, oh my God, like panicking, like texting my brother. I was like, you need to get on now because I can't wait. I need to press play. And then we were just texting each other through the whole thing. And it was brilliant. So, yeah. So we're not going to get into set choices just yet. But the first scene after that cold open, when you see that Imperial light cruiser and it's got the Mandalorian symbol underneath.
Yeah, the mythosaur, yeah.
How desperate are you to have that as a set? Because my word.
The thing was, I was sat there watching it, and I'm watching it on my phone screen because I'm on my lunch at work, sat in my car watching The Mandalorian. This is how I spend my Wednesdays. I'm sat there and I'm thinking to myself, how long did it take them to paint the mythosaur? Was that a thing before Bo-Katan found a mythosaur on Mandalore? Was it a recent, has it always been there? There were so many questions that I had, but then I looked at it and was like, oh, thank God I don't own Gideon's Cruiser because I then need this one to balance out that one.
I mean, I immediately went and picked up Gideon's Cruiser and I was like, do I try and add plates underneath this and try and design it? Like, there's got to be a way of doing it. I did try and like map it very briefly in my head. I was trying to map it out and I thought it's not the Gideon, the light cruiser that came out isn't quite big enough to actually get the detail, I don't think, on it.
No.
But yeah, honestly, when I saw that fleet coming over Navarro, I was like, yes, finally stuff is going to go down. The Mandalorian fleet was a lot bigger because they had the Gazanti freighters that they picked up in season 2 as well, which I thought was amazing. So like when you saw that fleet flying in, it was a lot bigger than I had kind of anticipated prior to that.
Yeah, and I think bar the New Republic, this is possibly like one of the largest fleets currently in existence that we're aware of, because obviously the Empire is in the unknown regions. The First Order isn't a prominent thing yet. The New Republic is the largest dominant force in the galaxy at this point that we know of. And they're breaking down stuff, aren't they? Yeah, exactly. So if you think about it, this group of Mandalorians have an Imperial light cruiser, several Gazantis, several smaller gauntlet-style fighters. They've got
Fang fighters.
They've got, TIE fighters and smaller support ships. So they're a force, really, if you think about it. Yeah,
and I think we'll get onto it later in the episode, but I think Gideon knows that as well, because he very quickly jumps at he's like, whilst we got the element of surprise, we need to attack. So we're kind of waiting on whether Axe Woves gets back to the light cruiser before they do. So we obviously see the fleet, and then it develops into going back to Mandalore. I loved, like, my brother texted me as soon as he saw that like pirate ship looking thing, and he just texted me saying Hondo ?
Oh,
I was like, oh, I wish.
It's like Pirates of the Caribbean meets Star Wars, and I'm all for it. Like it was what shocked me was I thought, again, is it Hondo Anaka? Is it something new? And then when you realize that they were Mandalorians who survived the purge, and they have seen some stuff, like those guys have survived the destruction of their homeworld. They've had to struggle for resources. Some of them are weak, some of them are ill. But also, I'm sat there thinking to myself, that is cool. Like, it's different as well. It's a fun thing, that.
I think we're so used to seeing this like pristine Mandalore from the Clone Wars, and the Mandalorians being like very technological, like they've got everything together. And then to kind of see these guys that you can just tell they've been piecing their way through the last sort of 10, 15 years or however long it's been, just trying to survive on Mandalore, I thought was really cool. I got worried, very briefly, when we saw the big creature. I was like, oh God, are we going to have another 20 minutes of them fighting another like massive creature? So I was glad that we kind of, it took out the ship, but then they all just carried on. I was like, okay, good. Like, we don't need another 20 minutes of Mandalorians fighting a huge creature.
It's like Godzilla, really.
But we've skipped over one thing that I watch a lot of things on TV. funny things as well, but I am not the sort of person that's going to sit there and like laugh out loud at TV. But I was like giggling away to myself as soon as they put Grogu in IG-12 as he is now.
Yeah.
Oh my God. As soon as he started pressing those buttons and it was yes, no, I was like, I was laughing out loud. It was one of the best things I've seen on TV in ages.
Yeah. And I liked the idea, like when you heard it say yes, you thought, wait, hang on. Is Grogu communicating with us? But when you just realized it's yes, no, and all he does is push a button, I was a bit like, oh, okay, that makes more sense now.
Yeah, but I just thought it was great. And when he's like stealing the food as well, like I think that's what this episode did really well. That I think other episodes in this season haven't done quite as well. Is like balancing the comedy with the action, not like getting too silly with it. Like it's silly comedy, but it's kind of Star Wars silly comedy that it still seems to fit in there. And I just thought that was great. And then when he breaks up the fight with Paz Vizsla and Axe Woves, and he's just like, no. I was like, yeah, brilliant. Amazing Grogu. So yeah, I loved Grogu in this episode. I thought it was nice that they kind of almost gave him a voice in this, like he's showing that he knows right from wrong and what they should and shouldn't be doing. So I thought that was great. Just really quickly, we've had a comment from Dr. Mad Studio. I do wonder when Thrawn makes his return to the known galaxy, will Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, and Lando get involved? Well, we just discussed this, talking about the Mandoverse movie. I was sort of saying I would be very surprised if Luke didn't get involved, because obviously he is known by Ahsoka. He's known by the Mandalorian. If there's a big battle or something going on, we'd like to think he does. Yeah, so Dr. Madsu is saying, I have a strong feeling things will play out similar to the Thrawn trilogy books by Timothy Zahn. I think it's going to be, they're going to use a lot of elements from Heir to the Empire. I mean, even Ahsoka says it in the trailer, doesn't she? But we'll get on to Thrawn in a minute because we'll start discussing our ridiculous theories for the final episode. So obviously the Mandalorians go down into Mandalore, and you can feel like they're walking into something.
Yeah, you just instantly knew it was going to be an ambush or a trap. You just feel it.
As soon as they kind of drop down, you're like, this is all a bit too easy at the moment. Other than the big monster, like there's been no resistance whatsoever. When you see the Imperial base in Mandalore, I was like obviously that's where Gideon has been this whole time. Like he's such a Mandalorian wannabe, isn't he?
Like this guy is the epitome of, I'll build my. It's like what happened to Darth Vader, isn't it? Darth Vader had his castle built on the place of his biggest defeats, which was Mustafar. Yeah. Gideon has an underground facility based on the culture that he obsesses over, he admires, and he, in a weird kind of way, he hero worships the Mandalorians. As much as he defeated them and destroyed their home planet, he respects them as warriors. And to build your base underground on the ruins of their civilization, it's a pretty cold, bold move to do, to be honest with you, because nobody's going to find it because they think Mandalore is poisoned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is obviously this story that Mandalore has been poisoned, or it's not, the atmosphere isn't breathable, or you can't live there. I think that's obviously been perpetuated by the Imperial Remnant. They've been spreading those rumors so that people don't find them there. But yeah, I thought it was actually quite refreshing for him to come out and say, look, I know that the Mandalorians are great because of this, the Jedi are great because of this, the Empire were great because of this, and we're just going to cherry pick all of those best qualities from everyone and create our new empire. I just thought, like, for a bit of honesty from an Imperial for once, I thought it was really cool to kind of see that. Obviously, his helmet, like when that becomes a Black Series helmet, which it absolutely will do, that's going to be a big seller, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think I like the fact that again, you've seen the Bad Batch. We got the TK troopers. I like the fact that Gideon now has Beskar armored stormtrooper variants as well. And he now has his own version of Mandalorian armor, but it's basically ISB Gideon Beskar armor as well. It's the armor that he wishes he could have worn in his duel against Din Djarin on his cruiser. But it's just like, wow. The whole episode itself was really good. And I think the showdown in that Imperial base and just the sheer magnitude of the desperation of realizing, hang on, these guys have got Beskar armor. What do we do? And having to kind of mold their tactics to basically fight themselves was just like, oh, great. I thought it was well done, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. I think obviously isolating Din Djarin sort of raised the stakes a little bit, didn't it? To kind of this is our main character, and actually this season he probably hasn't felt as much the main character as maybe Bo-Katan has. So it was interesting to see them kind of take that route, and like, we're going to take Din Djarin away to the I can't remember what he said.
Debriefing. He said to the debriefing room.
Yeah. So yeah, that was great. And then obviously when they realized they were going to kind of push their way out, and Paz Vizsla stuck behind. I mean, what a last stand for that guy.
Yeah, the comment from Dr. Mad Studio, just to chime in, is that everyone noticed the horns on Moff Gideon's helmet. No doubt that was done as a reference to Darth Maul, who ruled Mandalore for a time. Yeah, it's very much a possibility. You look at that and you think, and in fairness, it highlights the fact that Gideon himself is that guy. He's obsessed with their culture. And I think if you're going to make the Ultimate Warrior and you take the best bits of all these different cultures, you're going to make yourself a set of Beskar armor named after a guy who was the only non-Mandalorian to seize the throne of Mandalore. So it's kind of fitting, really, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think obviously the armorer has got horns on hers as well. And I think there's actually probably quite a lot of Mandalorians that, because they're loyal to Mandalore and they're loyal to this idea that the leader of Mandalore should have their respect, that they follow them, that I think probably a lot of Mandalorians still look upon Maul as a good leader, as a kind of a good warrior, at least, an honorable one. So it would be really interesting at some point to kind of get their take on, at least the armorer's take on Maul and his reign as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that we haven't touched on that was been a very big focal point of the episode before we kind of go towards the major plot point of the episode to finish off on is the fact that Death Watch, or the remnants of Death Watch, with the Night Owls and Bo-Katan's forces, have had to accept that their ideals and what they thought was right, what they thought was wrong about their culture, they've had to put all that aside because they know deep down that Mandalore, whilst a powerful planet, a powerful, government for its time, the only time it ever got defeated was when Death Watch tried to take over Mandalore, and vice versa, and they became pacifist and things like that. So I liked the tension between both sides as well. That was nice.
Yeah, it was. And I think obviously when that fight broke out, Bo-Katan sort of said, that was inevitable. I think it was, but I think someone like Paz Vizsla dying the way that he did, I think that's the sort of thing they needed to kind of bring them all together, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Praetorian Guards, Josh, how cool were they?
I mean, it's a nice sort of link to the sequel trilogy as a whole, and it also shows how long they have been part of basically the Imperial Remnant and things like that. But it's the fact that it took 3 Praetorian Guards to drop Paz Vizsla. If that is not a testament to Paz Vizsla as a character, I don't know what it is. Like, he was the only character amongst the Mandalorians who was able to effectively, with his repeating blaster, shoot the Beskar wearing stormtroopers over the edge and kill them. And then it takes 3 Praetorians who he knows he's probably going to die, but he puts the shield on his gauntlet, pulls out his knife and his vibroblade, and he's like, do you know what? If I'm going down, hey, this is the way. And he just does it. And I was all for it. And I was sat there for like the last 5 minutes, just intently watching, and it was great. And the Praetorians as well. Didn't really think they did much in The Last Jedi, but they did an awful lot in the few minutes they were on screen in this.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. And I kind of went back and watched that scene from The Last Jedi. And actually, when you think about how powerful Rey came across and Kylo Ren, like they put up a fairly decent fight against those two. I thought that was actually a really good sort of fighting set piece in that film. So
yeah,
no, I thought that was great. I thought the way that it was done was brilliant. And then obviously the other Mandalorians escaping, but we don't really know where they've gone off to. So this has kind of left it very open-ended for the final episode.
When the armorer left Mandalore in the gauntlet and you saw her taking off and going through the clouds, I was expecting either her to find like the cruiser aflame, being attacked by bombers and interceptors, or her being shot down.
Yeah, the way that they filmed that, they're definitely trying to get you to think that, weren't they? Because as it was going up and it was like going through all the rocky thing, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is them trying to say, oh, this is a horrible journey or whatever, but it's only going to get worse when she comes out the other side. I genuinely thought she was going to come out, and like you say, I thought the whole fleet was going to be wiped out, or at least in the midst of a big battle. So yeah, that was good, so that they kind of like built that up and then threw you off a little bit. So what do you think? How do you think this is going to get resolved next week?
There's going to be a space battle above Mandalore, which would link into one of the set rumors and set leaks we've had, which is the Fang Fighter versus TIE Interceptor.
Yeah.
That is going to be a part of that. Din Djarin, there will be obviously a rescue attempt of him, or he will escape from Gideon. But my thought is that they'll either defeat Gideon or it'll be a stalemate. And then next thing you know, you'll see the shadow of a Star Destroyer above Mandalore, a Chimera underneath it, and then the credits.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think that I don't know if it's going to be a post-credit or the last scene, but I think now that they've shown Thrawn in the Ahsoka trailer, they've announced who's playing him. I think it would be mad if he isn't the kind of end to this series.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely going to be the kind of ending. I think, sort of like I mentioned earlier, I do think that the Mandalorians will win this battle. I think Gideon may carry on. I don't really know in what capacity, but I think the Mandalorians will win this battle, and Thrawn will kind of be a bit like, why is he not following orders? I had a plan. We need to stick to the plan. We had another example of this in Rebels, where Thrawn had his Star Destroyers in a line against the rebellion, and one of the Star Destroyers decided they were going to go out of path and start shooting, and immediately that left a gap, and the rebels escaped. And you just think, why are these people not listening to Thrawn? Like, he's so much more intelligent than everyone else. So I think that's definitely where they're going to go with it. I think we're in for a spectacle, at least for that big space battle.
Absolutely. And part of me also thinks we're going to get something big from Grogu as well.
Do you think? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, because like his dad effectively has been captured. His Aunt Bo is thinking to herself, okay, my most loyal follower is now a prisoner of Moff Gideon. What am I going to do? And then Grogu's just going to completely... Grogu is either going to take the Darksaber, like use the Force to take the Darksaber from Bo-Katan, and he's going to fight like Gideon or someone to rescue Din Djarin, or as he causes that much pain and suffering to Din Djarin, there's a moment where Grogu could potentially turn to the dark side as he's about to execute Gideon.
Yeah, maybe. I think Grogu has got to have some sort of involvement in the rescue of Din, doesn't he? I think there's no way they can do that without having him involved in some capacity. But yeah, we haven't. They've hinted at it this season because in the first or second episode where Din goes to Mandalore, Grogu uses the Force as he's kind of getting out against those creatures and going back to Bo-Katan. So we've hinted that Grogu's Force powers have increased because he's not having a nap every time afterwards now. So it would be nice to kind of see that come to fruition and him use that to help Din. I would love to see him like do a Luke Skywalker and crumple Gideon's helmet over his head, but I think that might be a bit dark for a Disney Plus series.
Yeah, but you never know. Anything's possible. I mean, they did mind flay Dr. Pershing, so.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be interesting. Actually, I don't think they'll have time for it now, but it would be nice to get more information on cloning, because I know that all of these stories are that's how they're all being linked at the moment through cloning.
There's theories, isn't there, that the obviously this Project Necromancer that Commodore Hux is dealing with is to do with resurrecting Palpatine. There's theories that Gideon is making clones that use Jedi DNA, Mandalore DNA, Imperial DNA, and he's basically used all the best bits to create the ultimate warrior, hence why they wear Beskar. There's theories as well that he's got his own agenda that is not part of Palpatine's plan. And there's also the theory that Gideon is going to clone himself as well, because he sees himself as the ultimate tactician and warrior, powerful than Thrawn. So what better way to cement your legacy than make clones of yourself?
I think they're definitely hinting at. I think Necromancer is definitely the plan to resurrect Palpatine. Obviously, Gideon walks past those kind of cloning vats on the way into the Shadow Council. I have paused it on it to try and have a closer look, and there's no like real outline, but certainly the ones that we saw in season 2, it definitely looked like sort of more messed up versions of Snoke. And I think obviously Snoke is an early, not quite perfected Palpatine, I think is kind of what they ended up going for. Dr. Mad Studios is off now, but he was just saying about the Praetorian Guards being former Royal Imperial Guards. I think that is probably what they are, don't you think? Is that they're just kind of like an evolution of the Royal Guards?
Yeah, because there's the whole there's that whole expanded universe story about one of the Emperor's Royal Guards who goes off and forms his own Imperial remnant and is actually a very powerful foe. And he's like the last Imperial Guard that was truly loyal to Palpatine, while all the others went with warlords. He stuck with Palpatine and the resurrected Palpatine. So there's a lot of potential there for what could happen. But I think cloning has been a very big part of the Mandalorian, hasn't it? You know, we all suspected that Pershing wanted cloning for nefarious means anyway, and it always seemed like Gideon never wanted to clone Grogu or take some DNA or anything like that for the First Order, for the Imperials, for whatever. It almost seemed like it was for his own thing, and part of me wonders, has Thrawn always known that Gideon was going to do that, and this is his way of effectively proving that Gideon was neither going to be part of the plan and that he could stop Gideon, because he was like, well, no, you're not seeing the bigger picture here, Gideon. So I'm sorry, bye. And just like executes him or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that happening. I think Thrawn is acutely aware that a lot of Imperials are kind of out for themselves rather than, like you say, seeing the bigger picture. And he's kind of witnessed that throughout his ranks. People like Admiral Price, Arinda Price, who was in Rebels, but also in the Thrawn novels as well. He has quite a close relationship with her, and by the end of it, the Rebels, it's very much like you've done too much for yourself. You're doing this for yourself. You're not doing it for me or for the greater good.
Yeah.
And he kind of leaves her out on a limb in the end. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen with this, is that even if Gideon does get into a situation where he calls for help, I'm not sure anyone's going to be too forthcoming with that. I think they'll all quite happily let him die on Mandalore if it all goes wrong for him.
Yeah, very much so. But
yeah, sorry, what were we going to say?
I was going to say, but we'll see, because again, we've still got, based on this timeline, we've still got like another 10, 15 years before the sequel trilogy actually happens.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of blanks to fill. But yeah. I'm also thinking of people like you and I speak about this. We know Chiss, we know Thrawn, we've read the books, the original Heir to the Empire, the newer version. We know that Thrawn is smart, he's brilliant, he's wonderful. But at the end of the day, there's things out there in the unknown regions that we don't know about that are the reason Thrawn is looking for allies for the Chiss. And it'd be nice to see them all assume that, Thrawn is going to be the big savior for the Empire. He's their secret weapon, so to speak. But the reality of the situation is Thrawn will be like, well, no, you guys think I'm the heir to the Empire. I'm doing this for the Chiss. I'm doing it for my species. I'm not doing this for a regime that couldn't last 30 years. I'm doing this for a species that has lasted hundreds, if not thousands of years, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I just think that the whole idea of Thrawn coming to get the Empire as an ally means that there is a bigger threat out there.
Yeah.
And if Thrawn sees them as a bigger threat, then it's going to be bigger than any threat we've seen within this galaxy. And I think that's what interests me in the end. I think Thrawn and at least the Ghost Crew are going to have to team up against this bigger threat. I think that's where I want the story to go, because as someone that has obviously spent, I think we worked out it's like over 90 hours listening to all these books, you get the sense that Thrawn is not a bad guy. Thrawn is willing to do bad things to get to the answer, but ultimately Thrawn's the hero of his story, and I get that often makes the most interesting villains. But I think eventually Thrawn will have to work with some of the good guys to kind of get stuff done, or at least go and help the Chiss out. So that's where I want the story to go anyway. But it'll be really interesting next week to see if he makes an appearance or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so before we leave it for today, set choices. I thought this was a really difficult one this week, because although the episode was amazing, I was sort of too involved in it to think about sets as I was watching it. So I'll go to you first. Did you have one thing in particular that stood out that you thought that would make a really cool Lego set?
Yeah, the Mandalorian surface pirate ship thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the one saving thing from this episode, because we've never seen anything like it before in Star Wars. Like, obviously you've got, solar sailors that the Geonosians use. You've got obviously a lot of land-based vehicles and things like that. To see something like that. Oh, I mean, you've got obviously the speeders on Crate as well in The Last Jedi. To see something like that can go on the surface of Mandalore, I thought was really nice, and I liked it sort of wooden, black metal, ramshackled look. Like, it's been through the ringer a few times, but it looks really nice. And I think there's some really nice design elements, because it's almost like Jabba's sail barge meets a skiff meets a pirate ship. So I'm very much thinking along that lines. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think the same. I thought it was awesome. I love the fact that it rolled along as well, didn't it? Like, it was touching the surface. So that's how starved of technology and resources these guys are. Like, they are literally putting our world stuff together. Like, it's they can't even have a speeder floating around. So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, I think that was the obvious set that stuck out to me. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Mandalorian light cruiser, but again, it's just a light cruiser. We've had one of those. I just love the fact that there was a big mythosaur on the bottom of it. The one thing though that I thought, because we've had rumors of them before, I thought Lego may eventually do this, is an IG-12 mech.
Oh yeah, because obviously Grogu.
We've had rumors of the Boba Fett mech and the Stormtrooper and Duffy. Like, if you're going to do mechs, you've got to do an IG-12 one and have Grogu sat in the middle of it. Like, is that not perfect for it?
Absolutely.
Okay, Josh, we've been talking for an hour and a half. We probably could have gone on a lot longer if we hadn't stunted certain conversations, but I think it's safe to say that we're both very excited about the state of Star Wars at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Star Wars itself, I think if you're a fan, you have every right to be excited, because we were left with a very sour taste in our mouths after the Rise of Skywalker, and people were kind of like, well, what's next for Star Wars, because this has kind of ruined it for us. But the Mandalorian has come along. It has reinvigorated the fan base, and obviously with Star Wars there's a lot of gatekeeping, and it's one of the most diverse fandoms and very much diverse groups out there. There are some people who think that the new Disney canon is not Star Wars. There are some people who think that everything pre-Disney is not relevant anymore and it's all linked. But if you're a Star Wars fan right this moment, there's really good optimism, because it's Star Wars written by fans for the fans, people who have studied from George Lucas, got his ideas, people who love Star Wars, and you can see a lot of the passion in some of the episodes and some of the stories that they're telling. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think whether you believe that everything is part of a timeline or not, whether you just watch the films or you just watch Mandalorian, I think it all, the content that we're getting, whether you do just watch the Mandalorian or you do just watch the films, I think the quality of what's being put out at the moment is better than anything that we've had before, at least consistently anyway. And then if, like, for people like us that read the books or comic books, or you watch absolutely everything and you consume every possible piece of Star Wars content, it's all starting to link together now. So people of the High Republic have got the Acolyte coming out. If you've been reading all the Thrawn novels, you've got obviously Ahsoka and the Mandalorian that are linking into all of that. So I think all those people that have stuck with Star Wars and they've read everything, they've kind of consumed everything they could, that is all paying off now. Everything is linking. You're getting all these links back to the books, back to the original stories. So yeah, I just don't think we could have a better time to be a Star Wars fan at the moment.
And that's the miracle of Star Wars, isn't it? Every character in that universe has a backstory. You could form stories about background characters and people would be invested in them, because you can see how these characters shape a wider universe. And they use the Skywalker saga a lot, but that is what really started this off. But you can easily see them doing spin-offs and book series and things like that about other characters that have been in the background, and you learn about them. And that's the wonderful thing about Star Wars, is that every character in this universe, no matter how insignificant or significant, has a backstory, and it's designed so that they could pick a character at random and say, oh, this person is such and such. They were born here. Their parents were this, and this. They did this. You know, this is what they go on to be. So it's nice to sort of know that this universe can do that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is the thing that George Lucas put into the Star Wars universe, is that you watch it and you believe that this is a whole universe, that these, all, like you say, all these characters have backstories. They have entire lives that they've lived through. And it's almost like you could drop a camera or drop whatever in to any period of Star Wars on any character, and there would be an interesting story to tell there. So yeah, I think it's great. The more that we get, the happier I am at the moment. So I mean, we've got the last episode of Mandalorian next. We've got Visions 2, which we didn't even speak about. I'm sure we could maybe talk about that on May the 4th or May the 5th. And then we've got Ahsoka coming out in August, potentially Skeleton Crew before the end of the year, or maybe at the start of next year. So we've got a lot of stuff coming out. Yeah, can't wait for it all.
Oh,
okay,
great.
So where can everybody find you, Josh?
You can find me on my usual haunts, which are TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. You can search for the Galaxy of Bricks, all one word, all lowercase. You can also find me here at the Fandom Bricks podcast as well. And what about you, dear? So where can the people find you?
Yeah, same as. Find me here at the Fandom Bricks podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and we now have a Twitch page, which we're building up just to kind of get us out there as much as possible. And then on TikTok, you find me at Bite Size Bricks, as usual. But yeah, like we said last time, share this as much as you can. Tell your friends, even if they don't like Star Wars or Lego, tell them to watch it, because any extra views for us is appreciated. I'm really liking this chat feature, doing it live, being able to interact with people as we're doing it. I'm really enjoying. So if you are listening to this now, we are, depending on views and things, going to try and do more live episodes, and we will try and put out information about that as and when, so that you can come and join in the conversation as well. But that is it for our mega ultra packed Star Wars episode. We did finish talking about Lego, even if we didn't talk much Lego this week. But we think the amount of content that came out, it deserved its own episode, didn't it, Josh?
Yeah, exactly. And again, we are both massive Star Wars nerds. You probably switched off and stopped watching when we got onto Skeleton Crew or the Acolyte. So fair enough for those of you who stuck around. But again, we do try and cater to everyone. So don't worry, there is going to be a lot more diverse Lego-based content coming from the Fandom Bricks. But as Sam rightfully pointed out, we have had so much happen in such a short space of time with Star Wars. It was just stupid not to capitalize on that shamelessly.
Yeah, absolutely. We will obviously be back again next week, where we will still have to discuss Mandalorian, because it will be the season finale. But we will try and pad that out with some other more varied topics next week. So thank you very much if you've joined us.
Exactly. Thank you very much, guys. If you have anything that you want to like us to talk about as well, get in touch with either of us. That is a good thing. We want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, anything, topics you'd like us to talk about on the Fandom Bricks, and we can cater it. Please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will see you next week. Thanks very much,
guys.
everyone. See you later.